Boa constrictors versus pythons. Is one better than the other? Let's find out. Boa constrictors versus pythons. I'm going to be looking at the pros and cons of behavior and personality, care, and enclosure setup and size. Before we get started, I want to point out that I'm going to be talking about my particular animals. I have a boa constrictor imperator and a super dwarf reticulated python. So I will be talking from the perspective of owning these two particular animals. Quick reminder that animals differ. They have different personalities within the species, so just keep that in mind as you watch this video. First up, boa constrictors. This is my boa constrictor imperator. His name is Twee. He is a VPIT positive snow, and he is currently in shed. Sorry, bud. So his eyes are blue. They're all cloudy. He's doing his best Oogway impersonation right now, which always cracks me up. And he looks like he's been dipped in milk. Sometimes it can be hard to tell when they're so light that they're in shed, but he is in shed. So jumping right in, number one, personality and behavior. Personality and behavior of this particular boa is very, very docile and placid. He is 100% okay coming out of his enclosure, being held, hanging out for hours at a time. He will wrap around my shoulders while I'm doing other things like drawing or editing a video, and he's completely content just hanging out there. His movements are very slow and methodical. It has been said, or at least I have heard, that boas can be a little bit harder to read as far as their body language is concerned, because they do things like this where they rest. Well, he just moved out of it, but they'll rest and hang out in that S curve. I'm trying to see if I can get him to do it again. He doesn't do it as often, but yeah, there we go. So he's only for a second. So if you saw it, they hit that S curve in their neck, and sometimes they just rest in that pose. And it's not, I think that's a common pose that people associate with an animal that's about to strike. With boa constrictors, that is not the case. He is not about to strike. He is still very, very relaxed. I can feel it as I'm handling him. His muscle tone is relaxed. He's actually hugging himself right now because he's a silly noodle. But generally, he is gently hugging me to some capacity. So I'm gonna slip my thumb through. But if he does feel overstimulated or stressed out a little bit, his muscle tone will tense up a little bit. He'll constrict a little bit harder, not aggressively, just a little tighter to kind of hang on a little bit more strongly. He's never struck, he's never bitten. Again, I don't think their body language is hard to read at all. Once you get to know, hi sweetie pie, once you get to know your specific animal, especially if you handle them often, which I do, their body language becomes easier and easier to read. So it could be seen as a con as far as the slower, more deliberate body movements, because they can be a little bit harder to read as far as their body language is concerned. But I personally don't find it to be a con. I think it's easy to read an animal's body language, especially once you get to know them. Topic number two, care. For him, his care is very easy. He gets fed every 7 to 10 days. Basically, when he poops, shortly after, a day or two after, I will feed him again. Their metabolisms are way slower. Boas in general, metabolisms are much slower than a python. So he only poops maybe once a week. I do soak him once a week, mainly because he normally goes to the bathroom, both urates and poops in the soak while he is in there. So it makes cleanup really easy and keeps his enclosure very, very clean. He's in a naturalistic right now versus a bioactive, so he doesn't have a cleanup crew in there. So I find soaking once a week, especially since he poops in there, super easy. But yeah, cleanup and care, very, very simple and easy for boas. So that's, for me, a pro with this particular boa. He doesn't mess up his enclosure. He chills. He's totally fine. As far as care in regards to interacting and handling, he's totally fine coming out, but he's also totally fine just hanging out his enclosure for an entire day without coming out. If I've had a really long day and I'm super stressed out, or just don't have the time that particular day to spend a lot of time taking him out of his enclosure for additional enrichment, he's fine. He will just happily chill in his house and I'll take him out the next day. Ease of care is definitely a pro for a boa constrictor, I think. They're, in my opinion, fairly low maintenance animal. I hesitate to say any animal is low maintenance because every animal takes care and time and effort. So I still encourage anyone who owns a boa constrictor to spend time with them, to handle them, to offer them additional enrichment. But yeah, definitely a pro as far as time it takes to clean up after them and care for them in general. Size and enclosure setup. It's topic number 3. He is a boa constrictor imperator versus a boa constrictor constrictor, which is often called a true red tail. Boa constrictor imperators tend to stay a little bit smaller. He will probably top out at largest 7 feet in length. So his enclosure doesn't have to be as big. I mean, it's a generalization because enclosure size is relative to how you like to keep your animals. I like to keep my animals in very large enclosures with lots of enrichment. So he has a 6x2x2 that is coming that will more than likely be his permanent enclosure. However, how I'm going to set it up is providing him with some climbing opportunities, give him lots of enrichment in there. And if he does utilize that space a lot and he does get to that larger end of that size spectrum, I will be upgrading him one more time to a larger enclosure. So maybe an 8x2x2 or a 6x4x2, depending on how he utilizes his space. So yeah, size is kind of relative depending on how you like to keep your animals. This is just my personal preference. So that's boa constrictor imperators. Very gentle, very just soothing snakes to hang out with. So let's move on to pythons. So pythons, this is the one python I own. His name is Aries. He is a 50% super dwarf, 12.5% Jampea anery reticulated python. He just shed 2 days ago, so he's super shiny. So topic number 1, behavior and personality. As you can see, he moves a lot more and a lot faster than my boa constrictor does. He's very curious. He's always moving around, whether it's in his enclosure or when I have him out. He is not a snake that I can just take out and drape over my shoulders and do something else. He takes generally both hands to do handling, just because he's always trying to get into something. He's a complete goofball. He's very clumsy, always getting himself into some kind of conundrum. Because pythons in general, and Aries specifically, move so much faster, they can be a little bit more intimidating to handle and to interact with than a boa constrictor. Their behavior can be easier to read if you know what you're looking for, or more challenging because it can change so quickly. So again, this is a hard call as far as pros and cons, because it really does depend on what you're used to and what you're comfortable with. Aries is also very docile and very sweet. His movements are definitely less intentional. He just wants to get into everything and explore everything. Retics are like the border collies of that's my nose. They're like the border collies of the snake world. He's incredibly smart. He is tap trained, just like Twee is also tap trained, and that simply means when I tap on their enclosure before I go in to get them out, they associate that tap with me instead of associating it with food. He's scrolling through my, no, don't change the face of my phone, please. Okay, thank you. So when I tap on his enclosure, he's generally right at the front of his enclosure where his doors open anyway, and when I open it up, he just comes right out. If he's not and I tap, he comes to the front of his enclosure. So he's very, very smart. He loves to hang out. He loves to come out and explore, and he seems to really thrive on that additional enrichment of interacting both with different environments outside of his enclosure, but also with me in particular. Pros and cons of behavior and personality. I mean, again, it just depends on what you're looking for. Oh, that's my face. I think as far as a very fun interactive snake to handle, Retics are definitely a pro, and Pythons in general, just because they move a little faster. They're, again, just they will do more with you as you are handling them. Make sure you are comfortable with that. And it is, if you are, it's an absolute pro. Care, topic number 2. He is definitely more high maintenance than my boa. He needs just more in general. He needs to get out more. He is a much more needy, clingy snake, which is still so weird to think about, but they will create a bond with you, and he begs to get out of his enclosure and come hang out. He will explore when I have him out, and then if I try and put him back in, he will just keep on moving and hanging out at the front of his enclosure until I let him back out, and then I'll just curl up on my lap and take a nap. So he is very comfortable with humans. He seems to truly enjoy hanging out with people, which is really, really cool. Again, more high maintenance because it takes more time and energy and effort to have a snake that needs more attention. He also has a much higher metabolism than my boa does, so he goes to the bathroom a lot more, and because he moves around a lot more, that results in needing to clean his enclosure quite often. I clean it basically every day. I move stuff around, make sure that there's no urates or poop hanging out that needs to be cleaned up, straighten anything that he might have knocked over, and do a full clean out of his enclosure once a week. So I'll take everything, remove everything out, and just scan his substrate, make sure I didn't miss anything throughout the week, and if any of his items in his enclosure need to be fully washed, I will wash those as well. He is also in a naturalistic enclosure, so he also doesn't have a cleanup crew. That will be changed when I get his bigger enclosure here. So higher maintenance, I think for the majority of people would be considered a con. They take a lot more time, just care in general, cleaning, spending time. I mean, spending time with them is definitely a pro, and I actually really enjoy the care of animals, including cleaning up the messes that they make. But I think in general that could be considered a con. It's definitely more work than my boa constrictor. So I think I'm gonna list that just as a con generally. Generalization con. And the last thing, topic number 3, enclosure and size. He will probably get around 10-ish feet as an adult. He's also incredibly active and inquisitive, so he's gonna need a big enclosure. I'm upgrading him to a 6x4x2 in the very near future. However, I'm probably gonna need to upgrade him again when he hits his adult size, simply because he is going to be a long snake, and not only is he going to be very long, he's inquisitive. He needs that enrichment and that space to explore. So longer snake, very inquisitive snake, equates for me how I keep my animals to a much larger enclosure. The setup in that enclosure is also going to be a wee bit more involved because he's going to need a lot of enrichment. He's going to have a taller enclosure, so there's going to be climbing walls built out for him. He's going to have lots of bigger, very hardy, heavy plants for him to climb on and explore that hopefully he will not kill. So a little bit more involved in the building of an enclosure. Again, if you really enjoy this kind of project and this kind of upkeep of an enclosure, which I do, then this could be considered a pro, or it can be considered a con, depending on, again, if you like that kind of thing or not. It's a very personal thing. Boas versus pythons, they're both winners in my opinion. I love them both. Obviously I own them both. I would not own both types of snakes if I did not love them. I'm planning on adding more of both types of species to my animal family in the near future. So make sure, if you're trying to decide what is best for you, it needs to fit with what you're comfortable with and your personality. Do your research. Choose what's right for you. Don't let a YouTube video tell you what you should pick for yourself. Hopefully this video gave you a little better insight on how these animals can be as household pets. As always, if you want more snake content, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to live life with brave curiosity. Catch you next time. Bye. Go. Get it. Reach. You're gonna do it. Get that camera. Yeah.